Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Rachel Kruger, and I am a member of the customer support team, and I'm excited to be here to show you how to dig deep with cross-sections in Surfer. Today we will cover the following topics: how to create a cross-section using the profile command, how to create a profile from any polyline in a base layer, how to create a cross-section using the slice command, and lastly, we will touch on how to create a profile with vector data. After the discussion of each topic, I will stop for a few minutes to answer any questions. You can send your questions to the webinar host, which is Drew today, via the QA located on the Zoom toolbar at any time. Type in your question and it will be sent to the webinar host, who will either answer it or forward it to me. Please use the Q&A function rather than the chat. This will allow the host to ensure we see all questions in a timely manner. Feel free to send in all your questions. If we don't have time to answer them during the webinar, we will answer them via email once the webinar is complete. This webinar is being recorded. Later this week, we will post the recording along with the data used in the webinar. We'll send each of you a link when it's posted so you can test the examples out yourself. So let's get started. Geologic cross-sections are representations of underground geology and help to gain an understanding of the thickness and relationships between the successions of rock types or varying layers. Surfer offers two main methods of creating a cross-section: the profile command and the grid slice command. The former is faster and easier, but the latter allows you to specify exact XY values for the cross-section line that the profile is drawn for. Let's first take a look at using the profile tool. The profile tool allows for the user to digitize a line on the map. The profile, or cross-section, is automatically created from this line as a base layer and added to the existing map. The profile displays distance traveled from the first point to the last point on the x-axis and elevation on the y-axis. This is shown here with an sample data from Mount St. Helens. The profile can be applied to any non-tilted and planar map, which means drawing a profile across a 3D surface or wireframe requires a few more preparation steps that we will go over later on. So let's take a look at an example. So I'm going to open up a new plot window, and then I will open a grid file as a contour map using the Home, New Map, Contour command. I'm going to select my lower unit grid for this example. Okay. So the profile is created using the Map Tools, Add to Map Profile command. Notice that the profile button is grayed out. This is because we have not selected the object we would like to create the profile for. So I will select the contour layer in the Contents Manager, and then I will click the Profile button. You'll notice that my mouse is turned into crosshairs. We'll draw our line for the profile by clicking on the map where the cross-section line should start. So I'll click a single click and release to start drawing the line. You can see that the line can be drawn in any direction, and I can draw a straight line, or I can click to add points along the way. When I'm done with my line, I just double click to release. And we're shown a Surfer warning here. If you'll notice, our profile line is outside of the map limits, and Surfer is asking us if we want to adjust the map limits to include all of the data from this layer. I'm going to say no, because I just want my profile to end where the map already ends. And when we click no, you can see that the profile has been added automatically to the map. A base layer has also been added to our map object, and the polyline is the line of the profile. So let's say I wanted to edit the profile line. This can be done by expanding the profile base layer like I just did, and selecting the polyline using the Feature, Edit Features, reshape command. I can move vertices by clicking and dragging. And notice as I update the line on my map, my profile is updated automatically. I can also add points along my profile line by holding the Control key on my keyboard and clicking. And I can also delete points by selecting a line and clicking the Delete key on my keyboard. So I'm just going to straighten out my line just a little bit here. Okay. When you are happy with the profile line you've created and you're done reshaping, you can either hit the Escape key on your keyboard or you can click the Reshape button again. So the Profile tool can also be used to create a cross-section of a map with multiple layers. And we'll take a look at an example now with some 3D surfaces. I'm going to move these maps out of the way so we can focus on our 3D surface maps. So we'll add our first 3D surface by clicking Home, New Map, 3D Surface. And I'm going to select my lower unit grid. Okay. And we'll add another surface to this same map by right-clicking over the map object, clicking Add to Map, 3D Surface. And this time I'm going to choose my middle unit. And we'll do the exact same thing again for our third layer in the map. Add to Map, 3D Surface, upper unit. Now that we have all three surfaces added to the map, I'm going to add a base to each surface by clicking the layer and selecting the Show Base option under the General tab of the Properties window. So you can see the base was added to this layer. I will do this for each layer. And then to differentiate between these layers and have a better visual, I'm going to change the colors of each of the bases. So I'll start with the lower unit. We're going to keep it gray. I'm going to change the color of the middle unit to a blue. And I will also need to reorder these so that the upper unit is on top and all the units are where they need to be. So now you can see that that blue unit showed up for the middle unit. And I will change the upper unit color to this gold. So now we can see our layers a lot better here. So as I mentioned before, profiles can only be added to maps that are not tilted and in the orthographic projection. If you try to add a profile to this map by going to the Features, Map Tools, Add to Map Profile, you'll receive a surfer error telling you just that. But we can temporarily change the projection of this map so we can add a profile. And to do this, we'll click on the map object. And then in the Properties window, under the View tab, we will change the projection to orthographic, and we will adjust the tilt degrees to 90. And you can either use the slider or you can type in 90 here. So now that it's in the orthographic projection and the tilt has been set to 90, we can add a profile using the Map Tools Add to Map Profile command again. And for our purposes, I'm just going to do a really simple straight line through our map. When we add a map, when we add a profile to a map that has multiple layers, the profile line automatically cuts through all of the layers on the map. So you can see here are three distinguished layers showing our lower unit, middle unit, and upper unit. So now that the profile has been drawn, I can change the map projection back to the perspective, and I'm going to change my tilt back to 30 degrees. So I'm also going to go through the properties for the newly created profile. So to do that, I'm going to click on this profile number 2. It's the profile we just created. And I'm going to spend some time going over the different tabs. So first, in the plot tab, you can see that you can adjust the title, and you can edit the title by either clicking the text editor. You can add symbols, equations, get specific in here, or for quick edits, you can expand your font properties and adjust your text that way. We also have the no data method, and in this section, the no data method controls how no data areas in the map are displayed in the profile. So here you can choose skip, which will not display any no data values. You can choose minimum, which will set the areas of no data to be displayed with the minimum elevation value of the profile. And you can choose a custom value, which will allow you to choose the elevation of the no data values are drawn to. So we're going to keep it at skip for now. And lastly, in the general section of the plot tab, we have the export profile data, and you can do this by clicking the Save to File button. This will save your profile line to a DAT file. So in the profile section, this allows you to change the display settings for your profile. The current profile shows the profile that you're currently viewing. And you can check on this when you go to your profile, you can see these blue dots. That's how you know which profile you have selected as well. So if I change this to the middle unit, you'll see now that that middle horizon is selected. You can also choose to uncheck the box next to Show Profile. You can use this if there is a layer in your map that you don't want to appear in your profile. Also, you can choose to adjust the display order of your current profile. So for my middle unit, if I send it backward, you see it goes behind the upper unit, and I can bring it forward again to place it where I'd like it in my profile. You also have the standard line properties and fill properties. And for this profile, I'm going to adjust the fill properties to match the fill properties we chose in the 3D surface map. So it looks like our base layer is a pretty good match with the gray, and I'm going to adjust the middle unit, which we're already on, to be that same light blue-green that's in the section. And then the upper unit is also represented by the gold color. But now we have a profile that better represents our 3D surface map that we see. Moving on to the Scale tab, you can see the Scale tab for the profile is very similar to the Scale tab of a map object. Here you can change the size of the profile. So maybe I wanted a little bit more vertical exaggeration. I can go into my Y scale and change the length to 3 inches. So these are in page units, so you might see centimeters. My surfer is set for inches, which is why I see inches. You can also choose to get rid of your vertical exaggeration by clicking proportional XY scaling. Just know if you do this and you have a map with a lot of vertical exaggeration, you might receive this surfer warning telling you that your profile will be very small. I'm going to click OK. And this is our profile with no vertical exaggeration. I'm also going to Control Z and click Undo so we can see our profile. I'm going to adjust my Y scale to what it was before as well. Okay. So we can then move on to the Limits tab. In the Limits tab, you can adjust the spatial extent of your profile. So the minimum and maximum X and Y extents. Maybe I wanted to make my profile a little bit deeper. I could come into my Y minimum and say add 3,800 instead of 3,700, so I can see a little bit more space below that last horizon or that last layer. I can also set it to use my data limits, and that resets me back to my negative 3,700. And then lastly, in the properties window, we have the info tab. And the info tab is where you can add any attributes if you need to. You can also adjust different axes properties of your profile. For example, I can go into the y-axis and the general tab. I can change my title text of my y-axis. And if I was looking at depth, I could change elevation to depth or anything like that, add units, anything in there. So apart from the profile command, you can also add a profile using any existing polyline in a base layer. So to do this, you'll want to select the polyline you wish to use for the profile. I happen to have a BLN that contains 2 polylines that I'm interested in viewing as profiles. Now the polyline must be in a base layer in a map that also includes a grid base layer. So I will add the BLN data as a base layer to my existing map, and I'll do this for my contour map by right-clicking on the map object, add to map, base. And I'm going to select my profiles BLN. As you can see, this added 2 polylines to my contour map. I'm going to turn off my profile line that I created at the beginning, as well as my first profile. And I'm going to expand the base layer with my profile, my new profile lines. So to add a profile with a polyline, you can simply right-click on the polyline and click Add to Profile. And it adds the profile like it did before, directly below the map. I can do this with the second polyline as well. Again, right-click, Add to Profile. And I have my 2 profile lines. So as another example, maybe I have some polylines that represent a horizontal or lateral drill holes, and I want to know how a certain geologic horizon changes across the length of my drill holes. And the geologic horizon here being represented by the contour map. If I want to compare the values of the horizon or along each planned wellbore, I can quickly create profiles for my existing polylines. So here I have polylines that I created overlapping each wellbore, and I can go in as before by right-clicking, Add Profile. And my profile is added. And I'll do this just a few more times with my other wellbores. To see how my wellbores might compare along the same horizon. Okay. So, but to truly compare them, I might want to make sure that they're on the same scales. So given my existing profiles, I see that my maximum elevation between these 3 is 2,200 feet, and my maximum distance is around 630 feet. So I can go into a profile and I can adjust the limits of my profile. I'm going to change my X max to 630. And you can see that it extends the limits of my profile without extending the data because we do not have data over there. And to compare all of these profiles, I can go to the Home clipboard, and I can copy the format of this profile, and I can select another profile that I'd like this format copied to, and I can go back to Home clipboard and choose Paste Format. And you can see that it adjusted the X and Y axes and spatial extents to the same extents that were on my profile below it. I'm going to do the same thing with profile 3. I can select it on my map, or I can select it in the contents window, and I'm going to choose Paste Format. Okay. You'll also notice that when you choose Copy Format and Paste Format, it'll paste all the format options of your profile. So you might need to come in and change the title of your different profiles because the title will get copied over as well. So I will just do this for the two that we changed really quickly. So it's a plot tab, title. Okay. So now we have 3 profiles that all share the same scales, and you can see what your geologic horizon is doing across these 3 different wellbores. I'm also going to go ahead and align my profiles so that my y-axis and the start of my x, so my 0 mark, is aligned with each of these, just to make for even easier comparison. And to do this, I will click Layout, Arrange, Align, and I will align to the left. And there we go. 3 profiles that you can easily compare. Okay. I will go back to my original plot document. So do we have any questions about the profile command or using polylines to create a profile before we move on to the slice command? Okay, so we do have a question. Is the X dimension of the cross section to the same scale as the map? And when you create a cross section, you can see that it defaults to some certain width values that relate more to your page dimensions. You can set it to the same dimensions as your map if you want to measure your lines out. So Surfer does not automatically create the profile with the same X dimensions as your map or as your profile line. Okay, then we get a question, is it possible to reverse the axes of your profile? And the answer is yes, you can choose your profile. And if you want to reverse your x-axis, you can select your x-axis here. And in the scaling tab in the properties window, you can click reverse axis. And this can be handy if you your profile will automatically draw in the direction that you started drawing in. So it can be really handy to just reverse that quickly. Another question, how many layers can be displayed? I don't believe Surfer limits the number of layers that can be displayed. I've seen cross sections with many, many more layers than 3. That would probably depend on the processing power of your computer, but Surfer does not limit the number of layers that can be displayed in the profile. Okay, if there are no further questions about the profile, then we will move on to cover the slice. So the profile method is quick and easy, especially if you're okay with manually drawing a cross-section line on the map, or if you are okay drawing some polylines and creating your profile from those polylines. But if you already have specific XY values that you need to use for your cross-section line, you can also take advantage of the grid slice command. So this option extracts a slice through the grid along the trace defined by a polyline. The polyline can be drawn on the map as part of a base layer, or it can be in a vector file format. So this can include a BLN, BNA, shapefile, DXF, or other similar vector file formats. If you have the XY values for your section line, an easy vector format to create is the BLN format. It is an ASCII format consisting of a header line with the number of vertices, followed by the XY coordinates of the vertices. You can create this file in Notepad or in the Surfer worksheet. More information about creating a BLN file can be found on our support portal in the knowledge base article, Create a Node Data Polygon or BLN file in Surfer. And we'll also take a look at the BLN file output we create in the coming steps so you can have a better idea as to what that data looks like. Once you have one or more grid files and the polyline defining the section line saved as a vector file or drawn on the map, which includes the lines we've drew for the profile, so here, then you can click Grids, Calculate, Slice. Okay. In your grid slice dialog, the input grid section, you can either select a grid base layer created from your grid file or click the Browse button to navigate to and select the grid file. We'll click the drop down and choose one of our 3D surface grids. So I'm going to go ahead and just pick the lower grid again. In the slice line section, you can either select a base layer created from your vector file or the base layer with the drawn line on it, or click the Browse button to navigate to and select the vector file. I'm going to click the drop-down menu here too, and I'm going to select our Profile 2 line. The Profile 2 line is the same profile line that we made for our 3D surface map. In the Output BLN section, we'll click the Change File Name button, and we'll give our file a name. So here, this is our lower unit. So I'm just going to name it lower unit. And click OK. If desired, you can also create a DAT file. The DAT file differs from the BLN in that it will export the coordinates as well as the Z values. You can use either file, the BLN or the DAT file, to create a slice, but due to the extra information in the DAT, there are more steps to prep the DAT file and save it to the BLN to create the slice. Because we do not need the DAT file for our purposes today, I will leave this box unchecked. Click OK. So before creating the profile from our BLN, let's take a look at the file that we just created. We'll open that newly created BLN file in Surfer's worksheet by clicking File, Open in Worksheet, and selecting our lower unit BLN. Column A contains the X value and column B contains the Y values. Cell A1 contains the number of vertices in the line. This value is what tells Surfer to draw these coordinates as a line rather than the individual points. So if we scroll to the bottom, we can see that our number in A1, 147, will be equal to the number of rows that contain data in this file. So we should expect 148. Okay. So, and then the cell B1, you can see it has a 1. This value would be used if we were assigning no data if we were using a polygon. But it can be ignored and it will not be taken into account when creating the profile. Similar goes for column C, which represents C values. This will also be ignored and not taken into account when creating our profile. So now let's create the profile back in the plot window. We're going to click Home, New Map, Base, Base. And in the Import dialog, we're going to select our newly saved BLN, and we're going to click Open. And there we go. So I'm going to move the map by selecting the map and dragging it over to our other profile. Zoom out. And you can see that the scales are a lot different between our profile created with the profile command and our BLN. So if you'd like to change the scale to more closely match our profile so that we can compare between the two, we can do that by selecting the map in the contents window, and in the properties window on the scale page, we can adjust the length of our Y scale page units. We had 1.5 on our original profile, so that's what I will put here. Great. So we're going to go ahead and add the middle and top surfaces now. And we need to create those grid slices as well. So we'll click Grids, Calculate, Slice. And in the input grid, I'm going to pick my middle unit. And the slice line is going to be that same profile to slice line. I'm going to give my new BLN a name, which will be middle unit, and I'll hit save. I'm going to add it to the map now by right-clicking on the map object, add to map, base, and selecting my middle unit BLN, clicking open. You might get some errors, a surfer warning basically saying that the middle unit now exceeds the current map limits. This is because the middle unit is above our lower unit, so it's currently plotting above our axes. I do want to adjust the map units to include all of the data, so I'm going to hit yes. And my middle unit was added. And I will do this again for the lower unit or the upper unit, and I'm going to do it just a little bit faster this time. So again, grids, calculate, slice. I'm going to choose my upper unit grid, my profile to slice line. I will rename my output BLN to upper unit. I'll click save. And I will add it to my map by right-clicking, add to map, base, and selecting my upper unit. You get the same surfer warning, and yes, we want to adjust our map limits to include this layer as well. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and adjust the scaling again, because since we added more units to this profile, our Y scale has gotten a little bit larger. So I'm going to adjust this to 1.5, the same as our previous profile, and drag that. And you can see that it creates the same profile. It's using the same data. It's just a different method of going about to create a cross section. Okay. So looking at the properties window for the grid slices, or the newly created map with the BLNs, you can see we do have a few more tabs, like coordinate system and frame. The scale tab is similar, limits is the same, so it's mostly just the frame and coordinate systems tab. So if you'll notice that we do not yet have any fill options for our BLN layers. This is because these are considered polylines at this point. So we have a line option and a coordinates option, but no fill option. So if we want to add a fill to our BLN profile or cross-section, then we will need to change our polylines into polygons. And we can do this by selecting the base layer or the polyline and clicking Features, Edit Features, Reshape. And you see all of our vertices are highlighted now. So what we're going to do is I'm going to zoom in here, and we're going to select the last point along the line, and we're going to add a point by holding down Control and clicking and dragging that point down to somewhere below the map. I'm going to do that to the other side as well. Select the last, select my 3D polyline, select my last point, Control Add, and then drag that line down. And once those lines are, or those points are added below the map, you can exit Reshape, and we'll want to change it to a polygon by using the Features, Change to Polygon command. And you can see in our contents window, this has been changed to a polygon. And once it's been changed to a polygon, you can now go down to the Properties window, click on your Fill tab, which now appears, and you can select a pattern and a fill color for your polygon. Okay. I'm going to move this upper unit down to the bottom in my map so I can see my other units while I'm trying to edit them. I'm going to perform the exact same steps now for the polyline that makes up the middle unit and the polyline that makes up the lower unit. So we want to reshape the polyline, Features, Edit Features, Reshape. We're going to add points to the ends of our polyline. Control clicking to add the point and bring it down below your map. And do the same thing on the other side. Make sure you grab the last point. You can finish, click Reshape again to exit Reshape, and then change to polygon. I will again adjust the fill by adding a solid pattern and changing the color to the blue, and then moving this one behind my lower unit as well. Okay, I'm going to reshape the lower unit now, again, a little bit quicker than the last two. And add a point to the end. Exit Reshape, change to polygon, and adjust the fill to match my other profile as well. Okay. So the colors are a little bit different, but you can see with just a couple of extra steps, you can easily add your fill to your BLN created with the slice command and produce essentially the same profile. So before moving on to briefly discussing profiles and vector layers, do we have any questions about adding a profile using the slice command? I do have a question about the profiles. Is there a way of setting formats such as font size and colors to a default for use on a new data set and profiles? The answer is yes. You can set defaults under File, Defaults, and scroll down to find Profile. And here are where you can set your profile defaults, including your fill and your line. Okay, I have another question. Are there any reasons to use the slice command instead of the profile command? And so the main reason, as you can see, they create the same thing, and the slice might seem that it has a few more steps than the profile. The profile command is great and really easy, especially if you just need a general line, or if you drew some polylines and you can go ahead and use those polylines to create your profile. The slice command is helpful for especially if you don't need to be concerned about your fill properties or the aesthetics of your profile as much, but you do need a profile across a specific BLN that you've been given, or even several BLNs. You can also you can create the grid slice without changing the projection of your map back to your 3D surface map doesn't have to be flat to create the grid slice for your BLNs. Okay, I think that's all the questions we have for profiles and slices at this time. So I'm going to briefly discuss profiles and vector layers. So profiles are not created for vector layers. This is because the vector magnitudes are usually of a significantly different scale than the z values in the grid file, and profiles of widely different scales cannot be reasonably plotted on the same set of axes. If you wish to create a profile of slope, gradient, or magnitude values from a vector layer, you can use the following processes. For a one grid vector map, or any one grid vector map, you can use the grids, calculate, calculus command, and you can select anything in terrain modeling, terrain slope, or under differential and integral operations, the gradient operator, to create a grid of slope or gradient values, again, if you're using a one grid vector layer. For a two grid vector layer, you can use the grids, calculate, math command with the function square root of a squared plus b squared to create a grid of magnitudes if you're using a two grid vector layer with Cartesian coordinates. Or you can use the magnitude grid directly if you're using a two grid vector layer with polar coordinates. So once you've created these, you can use either the grid slice command or the profile command to slice through the slope, gradient, or magnitude grid as we did in the previous examples. So with that said, that concludes our presentation on profiles. If you have any additional questions, we will be here to answer them. Yeah, and I'll take any additional questions at this time. And if there aren't, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. You can also call our technical support phone line at 303-279-1021, or you can email any other questions to surfersupport@goldensoftware.com. And again, a recording of this webinar will be posted shortly on our website at www.goldensoftware.com. And I'll be here to answer any other questions that might come in. Thank you again for your time.